Welcome, adventurers. Today on Rebel Then King, we have again brought a friend. This is Fogelhut, my longtime GM and also fellow player on one of my campaigns, and I brought him here today to talk about the new playtest classes available in the Battlecry playtest. We're going to talk about the Commander and the Guardian, and we're very excited about it. Why don't you take half a minute to introduce yourself?
Hello, Rebel. I'm Fogelhut. I got into Pathfinder doing first edition, probably about 9 years ago now. My current wife got me into it, actually. We did a Kingmaker campaign, and it was fun, but I never, not once, understood what I was doing the entire time. So second edition, when it came out, made me very excited. I read the rule book and thought to myself, hey, this is way easier and makes a lot more sense. So that's kind of where I started out. Then when the pandemic hit, I decided I was going to try my hand at DMing. Just wanted to do it, or GMing, wanted to do it, and figured, hey, I'll ask a bunch of my friends that I never get to see to play with me, and a bunch of them said yes, and we're still going on that with that group of people about 4 years later now, and everyone's having, I think, a pretty good time. I am very, very excited about these two classes. I have a little bit more excitement for one than the other, and I think Rebel might be a little more excited about the other one.
I think you are right about that. And one last bit of housekeeping before we dive in. May the 4th be with you.
We are recording on the 4th of Mays.
Yes, and I apologize, adventurers, for not having this out sooner, but I had a really big work travel week that just happened to perfectly align with the new release. I actually first read the PDF of the playtest during my layover because it wasn't available when I boarded my first plane, and then I checked the Paizo website as soon as I landed and saw that the playtest was finally uploaded, and I saved the PDF to my phone and then read it multiple times on my next flight. And then I kind of read it throughout the week. So it's been a hectic week trying to get this out, but I think we're ready to go. So let's start with the Commander, which is the first of two new classes. Now, I'm guessing, as you were guessing there, Fogel, that I am most excited about Commander and you're more excited about Guardian.
That would be correct. Now, I think I have a little bit of extra insight as your GM, that you have a tendency to enjoy the support-based marshals, as you like to be able to hit sometimes, but mostly you like to be able to aid your fellow players, which is invaluable in this game that's completely based on teamwork.
Yeah, I think that sums it up well. I really do like playing support. I've never played just a straight up marshal or just like a ranged DPS spellcaster or anything. And that's why I was pretty excited when I just heard about what this class is, because it is an intelligence-based marshal whose special abilities are actually strictly teamwork abilities. So let's go over each class. We're going to talk about their saves, their offenses, their defenses, and then also their special abilities, because, you know, each class in the system is more than just a collection of the same mixing of base stats. They all have special abilities that they can do. But before we get into those, let's talk about some of the basics of the Commander. And you actually did some good analysis, and you went through and kind of looked at starting with the saves. And basically what I got out of your analysis was, if you're going to try to rely on your basic saving throws to get yourself through a campaign as a commander, you're not going to do very well.
You're not going to have a good time. No. From what I've used. There's a very nice shared document that uses kind of a numerical comparison, totaling up all of the saves as you go through a character's complete existence. The commander has the worst saves of any marshal in total. The inventor and alchemist actually are slightly better, which is kind of unfortunate. If the commander were a spellcaster, they'd be a pretty decent spellcaster with their saves. It's basically equivalent to the summoner's or save abilities, which works really well for the summoner because they have the Eidolon, which is going to need more of their saves. But man, you're just not going to have a good time if you have to roll saves. I think the commander is very specially going to have to stay back, which kind of fits the color of the class, and be kind of a general from a distance.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm seeing here too, is this might be, you might be able to lead from the front, but this might be more of a backline to midline kind of directing things type of class, which is totally fine.
Yeah, like maybe using ranged weapons more than up close, but this does kind of go against what the rest of the offensive capabilities of the commander are. I'm not. Basically, the commander has the standard martial progression that's there for anyone that's not a fighter or a gunslinger. But they are also the only class to get critical specialization at 5th with all of their standard weapons, with no caveats. It's very out there for someone that it feels like they want you to stay back because of your saves, but then they want you to push forward because of your offensive and defensive capabilities, because you're also trained in all of the armors.
Trained in all of the armor, and you're granted shield block as well, right? So that,
right, yeah.
So it really does seem like, both offensively and defensively, fighting up front is a totally valid option for this class. I wonder with the extra or the early critical specialization, if that's sort of supposed to represent your cunning, right? You just, yeah, exactly. Yep. That you know just where to shoot or just where to stab, and that's why you gain that critical specialization early. I also think perhaps because this is, remember, an intelligence-based class, so your accuracy is going to be diminished compared to your, what I like to call sort of the true martials, where you're either strength or dexterity based and will always be a little bit more accurate than these sort of secondary martials like the alchemist and inventor and the commander as well. So you have critical specialization earlier on, but you might not land that many crits.
You're gonna be hoping for those 20s more than anything else.
Yeah. And that is especially true because, well, as a commander, you won't be attacking all that often. I could foresee making one strike per turn, but if you're playing the class for the class abilities, well, you should be spending your actions commanding. So let's talk about that, because that is where we get into brand new mechanics. I'm going to make sure that we get to this part of the PDF so that people can kind of read along as if it wasn't an enormous wall of text that we're going to kind of gloss over. But all right, let's. I think this is always fun with a new class. We describe it to each other and see if we came to the same understanding. Okay.
Sure. Yeah. Go for it.
Okay. So, as a commander, it's all about commanding your squad mates. Is the official term for this. Your squad mates, technically, mechanically, are limited. I believe it was a number. Yeah, it was a number of allies equal to 2 plus your intelligence modifier. So,
yes,
as a +4 commander, realistically, you will be able to command all of your allies. If you have a party of 8, however, and you have 7 allies, technically, one of them is not going to be under your control. So that's something to consider. It is different than something like the Bard or Courageous Anthem. If you had a party of 50, that Bard could buff every single one of them with a single Courageous Anthem, and the commander could not do the same.
Yes, though every combat that you have is going to be the worst combat of your life because of all the amount of people that are going to be rolling initiative.
Well, that is true, but if you want to find out about a very large combat, you should watch my video with Mark from the local disaster tour guide. He goes over a very large combat that he ran with a couple of different people, and it sounded very, very fun. So
that's exciting.
I will make sure to link to that. Okay, so that is sort of the who of the special ability of the commander. And now there's the what, and that is something called tactics. Tactics remind me of spells. They remind me of prepared spell casting, in fact. But they're not magical. They are commands and abilities to use actions, I guess, that you give to your squad mates. So before we go over some examples, just to remind ourselves of what they are, how many you can use in the section on preparing and changing tactics. This, like I said, it reminds me of prepared spellcasting because there are, I guess I didn't count, but it felt like around a dozen or so level 1 tactics to choose from, but you only get to pick 4. That's basically the same as your spell book, but it's your field manual, if I remember right. Was it field manual?
Folio.
Folio, yes, your folio.
Yes.
So you have to pick from the full list. You don't get to have access to all of them. And then in any given day, you actually only prepare 2. So it is, again, like a prepared caster with a spell book where, wizard, you'll know 10 spells, but you're only going to be able to prepare, or 5 spells, but you'll only prepare 3 in a given day. Very similar feel to this. So it makes sense being intelligence-based, and if you are a fan of wizards, as I am, and you kind of like that little extra challenge of picking and choosing every single day, I think the commander is going to be a really good fit for you. I think that's it, at least at a high level, for the basics of them. Oh, there's one other thing in the mechanics I wanted to talk about, and that is the drilled reactions. Do you remember what those are?
Yes, drilled reactions are when you do a tactic, you are able to give an ally of your choice an extra reaction purely to use the tactic. Useful in cases, say, like a champion. The champion lives around their reaction. You want them to be able to use their reaction. So being able to give an ally an extra reaction in order to use your tactic makes it so that they will have the opportunity to actually use your reaction without feeling like their reaction is kind of getting eaten up.
Yep, that was my understanding as well, and I think that's the reasoning, really. One small concern I have with this class and with this playstyle, because honestly, this is something I've considered before, is like, I wish this class existed, years ago. My one slight concern at times would be taking agency away from other players by you're literally giving them commands, right? You're saying, you go there. And what if the other player's like, well, I had something else in mind. So I like that this drilled reactions thing isn't saying, like you said, hey, champion, you have to choose from liberating step or this command I'm giving you. No, they still get to use that liberating step. They basically have 2 reactions. And it's the same if you have someone who is playing defensively with shield block or prepared to aid someone else. They can still do that in addition to using the tactic that you are granting them.
Yeah, I think that's a huge thing, like including the fighter too. And there, you want them to be able to use their attack or reactive strike. Almost did it. Yep. Reactive strike is kind of like the thing that they've really got down. A fighter, fighter going to want to fight. And as you and I both know in previous games that we've done, if you give another player an opportunity to use something and they have to use one of their own actions or reactions to use it, that likelihood of using it just craters.
We're talking alchemists handing out elixirs and mutagens to people, right? Where it's just like
You bet.
people just say, yeah, I'm not gonna spend the actions to take the I'm a barbarian, I'm just gonna rage. That's what I do. I already have something for this. So yeah, I think if people were forced to use their own reactions, this class would fail. It would fall flat on its face. So I'm glad that they added that. So speaking of the tactics, there are a lot. We certainly are not going to go over all of them, but were there some that you thought were particularly cool, or maybe some that you think might kind of fall a little flat and might need some adjustment during this playtest?
Actually, before that, can I bring up two other things about the commander? One of the major important things, I think, about tactics is that even though you do choose two of them to use throughout the day, you can change them throughout the day. It takes 10 minutes, so essentially, while someone's refocusing or someone's healing, you can change your tactics and be able to adjust on the fly. So if you have something that's situational in your folio that would work perfectly in this instance, you can spend the 10 minutes in order to change it. Which I'm sure we'll get into as we talk about the actual tactics themselves. The other big thing being the commander's banner.
Oh yes, we skipped over that.
Basically, yeah, the banner is applying essentially I'm going to call it an aura, even though it's not an aura. It's an emanation. It's fairly equivalent to the martial archetypes. Dread, or not martial, not dread at martial, but just the marshal's aura that comes off of them, where you give your allies in a 30-foot emanation a +1 status bonus to will saves and DCs against fear effects, with the fun little extra caveat that if your banner is destroyed or broken, anyone who is under the effect of that emanation / aura becomes frightened one, which is kind of fun in some ways, but if your GM is going to just be destroying banners left and right, your allies are not going to be happy with you.
It's something to think about. The rules on what your banner can be are pretty wide open, which is really cool. You know, it reminds me a lot of, like, I'm finding lots of wizard comparisons here, but like the wizard's bonded item. You know, the bonded item they kind of say is like any personal token that you can have, that you can reasonably carry with you is fine. And this really is the same. They make suggestions of like, you know, your weapon can be your banner, your shield can be your banner. And to your point, well, if your shield is your banner, shields can and will be broken. I mean, especially if you're playing at lower levels and you've got, you know, what does a wooden shield have, like 10 hit points, I want to say?
Something like that.
And so
breaks at 5.
And breaks at 5, yeah. So you would need to be careful there. You would actually do a lot of harm to your party if you were using shield blocks. So I think most realistically you would you know, make it something like your weapon or a flag you carry or something like that. I could see having your banner in one hand and a weapon in the other or something like that. But
yeah, it is I think important to also note that the banner, there's no listing on if there's hit points on the banner, there's no listing on an AC on the banner just kind of exists. It also says that you can just kind of carry it. There's no bulk on the banner, and you can put it on a pole and carry it with your backpack, and it just exists there. And it made me think immediately of the Cavalier, the 1E version of the Cavalier. They had their own type of banner which was attached to their mount, and you could order your mount to go places with the banner while you do other things.
Your banner could be a fancy hat.
It could be just that tri-corner hat that you've been just longing for this whole time.
And actually, your banner could be like the Cavalier and be on your mount, because guess what? One of the commander feats, one of the feat progressions really, is all about having a mount. So that's something, if you want to, be the typical general who is on horseback giving commands, or bareback. Not bareback as in there's no saddle, but literally be on a bear. You know what I mean? Bareback on a bear. Then you could do that with this class.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Okay, so back to tactics. I have a couple favorite tactics of they gave a lot of tactics for the first level tactics, and then some expert tactics. I think it's just a couple, some master ones and some legendary. Obviously, this whole thing's going to fill out as the class is built. They're going to figure out what's going on with everything. But of the beginner tactics, I think I have to say that my two favorite are mountaineering training and naval training, because I don't think there could be a more important thing that's very situational, but giving all of your allies, or your squad mates, I should say, an actual climb speed and swim speed. And you get a benefit of not having to use your athletics skill. You can use instead a different skill that we haven't talked about yet, in order to see how you do without actually having to force that tactic. As long as that tactic is prepared in your folio, you can use a better skill for climb checks and swim checks.
I wrote down that I think those two are actually probably broken, and like literally I love them, but they might need to be nerfed, because I'm just thinking back to the number of times, I think this happens in every adventure campaign, adventure path, where you either need to swim across something, and there's like maybe one bridge that's controlled and it's going to be a really big bad fight, or you need to climb something. And I mean, the climbing I can think of for sure has happened in, I think, literally every campaign we've played. I remember I'd get up there with my athletic bard and one other athletic build and going up to the rooftops and then saying, well, I guess we'll drop in and try to unlock the door from behind, because all of these, are psychic with no strength and no athletic training isn't going to be able to do this. So to be able to give, yes, technically just your squad mates, but realistically your party, just a climb speed, all of them, I mean, that's like, there are spells that do that, and they're higher level spells, and they work on one person. So I think these are, I mean, they're incredible. I think realistically they'll have to be reined in some way, but I love it. And I like the fact that not everything is combat related with this commander class. Most of it is, but that's cool to see. And it does, it gives you the impression of someone who is leading on and off the battlefield.
I wonder if that's one of those things that they might move the full climb speed, swim speed up to expert level or even master level, and then at the beginner version that it applies your trained role to your allies. Maybe something that still has a bit of chance to it, but it's better than your, say you've got a construct inventor who has no athletics whatsoever and can't climb up a 5-foot rope. Then you're going to have to, give them a trained skill, basically athletics check, that might be able to help move them forward instead of floundering and hoping that someone pulls them up.
Yeah. I mean, the whole dexterity ranged main character with a construct or a companion out in melee is a great combination, but man, when you go to climb or bust open a door, it's terrible.
Oh, yeah.
One other thing I kind of realized we've glossed over just a little bit in tactics is that, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think all the tactics are divided into two categories. There's mobility and offensive tactics. Were there others as you level up?
There weren't that I remember that I was looking at, and even at the later levels, they only give you just general tactics. They're not listed under offense or mobility.
Yeah.
I do like the idea of filtering them between mobility and offensive. And that way you can also like pull out like full-blown defensive tactics and things like that. But I think it was starting to get a little wordy possibly for the playtest PDF here.
Yeah, I think that might be something that I would want to see reworked just a little bit, because I think you're right. As you go later into the later levels and look at your tactics, I think they just sort of dropped the offensive defensive tagging system, which begs the question, why does it need to exist at all? And I also don't think there was any character requisites or anything. You know, it's not like actually one other thing we didn't mention about this class, because it has none subclasses. There isn't a subclass.
Right.
And
no.
It makes me wonder, like, oh, maybe there should be a subclass that is like the ambassador or the strategist, something like that, who maybe has to pick more defensive or mobility tactics. Or you could be the war commander and you have to pick from offensive tactics. Kind of like the way that, you know, almost like a kineticist has to choose the feats that align to their elements, something like that. But as it is now, it's kind of nice that there are mobility and offensive tactics, but I don't know that it ties back to any actual class features. And in fact, it seems to get just dropped at later levels. So
yeah, it is slightly interesting. I can see the importance on, well, both of these classes don't have subclasses. Sometimes you want to not have to silo feats in a way. I think, I mean, fighter and monk both are also non-subclass classes, and it kind of really, it ups your versatility in different situations, and as you go through the campaign, it allows you to kind of bend into what the campaign is putting in front of you, and realizing the weaknesses of your party and that you might need to cover a little bit better. But it is interesting that it is just feat trees more than subclasses that grant you the extra feats. Because how nice would it be if you were a mobility based commander that you get extra mobility tactics to prepare? Like, you can have your 4 tactics that you're allowed to prepare, kind of like an alchemist. Actually, you have your 4 tactics to prepare, and then you get like 1 extra tactic at first. Maybe that's just you have to use one of your mobility tactics for this.
I think that would make sense to me. I was definitely thinking alchemist as you were saying that, where yeah, maybe you would be the strategist, or you know, whatever a subclass would be, and it could be you're granted a few tactics that are there, and then you get to round out the rest of your folio with others, or in your preparations you always have to prepare tactics of a certain kind, something like that. But
yeah.
So let's take a look at some more of the tactics. So I also, like, the mountaineering and naval training were just crazy to me. Some of the defensive ones, there are a lot of tactics that grant your allies some movement when it's not their turn. Defensive retreat is kind of cool. You give your allies it's 3 steps, right? Yeah, up to 3
Yes.
times.
Yep.
3 steps. So everyone gets to move 15 feet safely
Mhm.
when it's not their turn. That's pretty huge. If you're in a bad situation, you realize everyone back off of this thing. You can do that.
This is also, though, one of those tactics that you have to be underneath the influence of your commander's banner for. So you have to be within 30 feet of the commander anyway.
You can't run out way out ahead, get into trouble, and then try to back away slowly.
Yeah.
Yep. Form up, I remember being pretty similar, except it's a stride action and not steps. Passage of lines was swapping places, if I remember.
Yep.
But I feel like the offensive tactics are pretty interesting. Not going to go through all of them, but I really liked double team. That was fun. If I remember, that one was, one teammate gets to shove or reposition an enemy. And if that's successful, they still have to make a check. If it's successful, and that enemy lands within range, melee range, I believe, of another ally, then that ally gets to hit him. So you can have your monk go up there and grab a little punk goblin and throw him over to your barbarian, who then punches him in the face.
Yep. You got it.
That one was really fun. And I also really liked pincher attack, where your allies get to move, or your squad mates get to move. And if they end their movement adjacent to an enemy, that enemy is flat off guard. Sorry. is off guard to not only the squad mate who, landed next to them, but to any squad mate who participated in the maneuver. So technically, I think if I'm interpreting that right, you might have an enemy who is one stride away from only one of your squad mates, and two strides away from everyone else. As long as that one squad mate can get next to that enemy, everyone else takes one stride action but doesn't get next to them. Oh well, when those squad mates start their turn, I believe they can stride again to make up the distance and then strike that enemy while it's still off guard. I think.
Yes, there is a very important caveat that it is
step,
action.
not stride.
It is a step, not a stride.
Yep.
So, and it is listed that the step is a free action, so it's not going to eat up the reactions like we were talking about earlier. And it's all other squad mates who responded to the pincer attack. So if you have a squad mate who is, a 5-foot step away from an enemy, they 5-foot step, and your rogue, who was also within your aura, decides, I'm going to free step towards that person, that rogue is going to have automatic off guard until the end of your next turn as the commander.
Yeah, so that rogue could be 25 feet away, step 5 foot closer, and then on that rogue's turn, it could be the rogue's turn next even, they can move the remaining 20 feet and then make 2 strikes on an off guard target. So I really liked that one. I thought it was cool. In general, I think, that's kind of enough to get a flavor of a lot of the tactics. It's a lot of allowing your squad mates to reposition, to move, to step, to stride, and then there are some bonuses to attack, to debuff an enemy a little bit. They're scrolling to a few more now. There is another defensive one called Shields Up. People can raise their shields. That is really great. If you have multiple squad mates who use shields, let them spend all their actions striding, striking, aiding each other, whatever they're going to do, and then you raise their shields for them on your turn, basically. And then there's... yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say the importance to your firearms using Squadmates reload, it cannot be understated. Every gunslinger that I have played with hates reloading so much because it is just an action that you have to take. The gunslinger does get great stuff that they're rolled into their reloads, but at early levels, if you can have that reloaded gun ready for you on the beginning of your next turn, it is not a reload and strike, it is just a free reload reaction. But that's still something that they would likely take gladly, to be able to reload and have a readied firearm for their next strike, the very first action.
There are several ranged.
Oh, ready, aim, fire.
Yeah, ready, aim, fire. I've got up right now. There are several, and executioner's volley. Like lots of ranged team tactics in here. So, I mean, man, if you had a party that was multiple gunslingers, a commander, and then maybe get like a champion to keep you, safe when something gets close, it would be brutal.
Now you bring up executioner's volley, and while I think it is a very good tactic, it's one of two legendary tactics that are listed here, and the other legendary tactic is the one that you absolutely have to take. There's no reason to never not have it prepped ever. That is the most important tactic, I think, in the game, and I think because of that, it is broken. Would you like to describe Valkyrie's charge?
Well, you already used broken. It is stupid. It is amazing. It is incredible. It is the thing, while reading it, I just thought, this can't be real.
I mean, it is legendary.
It's
but
legendary.
This is too legendary. It's too legendary.
Keep in mind, though, it is a once per day tactic. So that is something to keep in mind.
And it's only available for 19th and 20th levels.
Yeah. So most tactics, I mean, I can't think. I guess there are. Yeah, they're basically tactics. Again, sort of like spells, follow most of them I would consider to be cantrips. They just use it at will. But there are definitely some every 10 minutes tactics, so they're very focus spell-like. And then you have tactics like this that are once per day, so it is very spell-like. All right, I've got it on my other screen here. I have to remind myself of all of the things that this does. So you restore 80 hit points to yourself and each squad mate affected by your commander's banner. That, even at a later level, I mean, that's going to be half hit points at least for like your maybe not, but it's a lot of hit points even at level 19.
I also think it's important to note it's not temporary hit points. No. It is straight hit points, which is crazy.
Yes. Okay, and if someone was unconscious, this is crazy. If someone was unconscious, this happens, someone goes down. Normally what happens, right? You get healed, you now have positive hit points, and you need to spend a turn getting yourself back in the fight. You have to stand up, you have to grab your weapons, you have to... Oh, not with Valkyrie's charge. Let's see. They can immediately stand and pick up any dropped weapons. So you can be almost TPK. Your entire squad is lying dead, and you give this Valkyrie's charge. Granted, again, another thing, it does take your entire turn. It's 3 actions, which we've kind of glossed over, but if you've been following along...
I would spend 3 actions if I was a commander to do that.
Tactics do come in 1, 2, and 3 action varieties, which is something we've kind of glossed over. But yeah, your entire party stands up with weapons in hand. And
so far, that's 3 actions worth of restoring hit points, standing, grabbing weapons.
Let's see, what else? Oh, they can then make a stride action. And surely that's, good enough, right? We've got to be done with this ability. Oh no, there's more. And if they end this movement with an enemy within the reach, they can attempt to strike that enemy. And now this is as their reaction.
Yes, it hasn't been a reaction at all this point. They can attempt to strike. They don't have to.
They don't have to.
Also, not only was that a stride that you get, you stride up to twice your speed. That's 2 strides, basically. That's 2 actions. By my count, that is 6 actions worth for every one of your squad mates that's under your banner.
So you can go from, without a commander, you might be looking at your party having 3 actions the next round because everyone is unconscious and only 1 player stands. So if you're a sorcerer, you can do a 3-action heal maybe and give everyone hit points. Good for you.
And be terrified.
And then they're still unconscious. Or I guess they're conscious, but they're still prone without weapons. Or you can be a commander and basically give everyone 2 rounds. And then it's their turn. And then they can use a turn. I mean, it is beyond silly. It's incredible. I feel like you said, even at level 19, 20, it's probably overpowered, but it's really fun. So
I was watching other people speak about it. The video that included Mark Seifter, former designer for Paizo, who said sometimes on their creation of playtest classes, they have very broken things thrown in there on purpose to be able to tune them down a little bit and like get a real feel for where everyone's at.
Yeah, I think that's
one
fair.
Of those.
Just a couple of other things, then we should get talking about the Guardian here. I did want to mention that within, we haven't really talked about feats much, so I'm just going to look at those a bit. We did already mention there's the whole steed and mounted. There's a whole feat tree for that. There's a whole feat progression where if you want to go that route, you can. There's also sort of a combat medic progression in here. So healing is an option. I love, I forget exactly if they called it something or if it just says, yeah, it's just part of the combat medic feat. You get to use your intelligence modifier rather than your wisdom modifier for treat wounds and medicine checks. So I think that's great. It reminds me a lot of the Kyurgeon. It's a cool way to play as a healer. And then kind of like spellcasting, again, there are some feats like adaptive stratagem that let you be flexible with what you've prepared in that day. So there are lots of cool feats for the class that, in addition to the tactics that you learn, and you do learn more tactics as you go along, and you can prepare more each day. Again, a lot like a spellcaster and their prepared spells. Lots of cool feats as well to help you build out your character as you level up.
I think the one thing that we haven't touched on yet that I do want to very slightly brush against is they do lean extra into the intelligence-based class meaning something, especially as a more martial-oriented intelligence martial. The investigator has, they're allowed to apply their intelligence mod to a lot of things. But I feel like this is even more honed so that you're not going to be as mad when you're building the character in the first place. The one other thing is that this is one of the rare times when you have an auto-scaling skill that occurs while the class happens. The inventor has it for crafting. I hope the alchemist has it for crafting in the next player core. That would be great. But not a lot of classes have a skill tree that just kind of goes up automatically. The commander gets warfare lore as a skill that they're able to use all the time, obviously, but it automatically progresses, and the commander is able to use this. And this is it's a lore skill, so it's an int-based skill. Starting at 3rd level, so a couple levels in, this boosts your warfare lore. You can then use your warfare lore as a commander to recall knowledge about creatures basically every creature that you go against, you can think, hey, what do I know about this thing tactically? On top of that, if you are observing one opponent when you're rolling initiative, you can use Warfare Lore as your initiative roll. So that takes your importance on perception and wisdom based builds way low. You can go ahead and kind of tank that just a little bit as you lean into your intelligence to use Warfare Lore for initiative, because there's no reason to not use it at that point.
It is very cool to see intelligence being used for more than just your spellcasting ability modifier. I mean, I like wizards and witches, but that's really what intelligence does for them. And there's really no other class mechanic that relies on or feeds into intelligence in any way. You did mention the inventor and crafting, and that helps with going into overdrive and everything.
Right.
I agree. I hope it plays into the alchemist a bit more. But yeah, that warfare lore, and there's some feats that let you make better use of warfare lore, and that recall knowledge abilities. There's a feat, I forget what it's called, where you can use your warfare lore, right, to feint or create a diversion, if I remember.
Yes. Deceptive. Is it deceptive tactics? Yes. First level feat.
Yeah.
You can use your warfare lore modifier in place of your deception modifier for deception checks to create a diversion or feint, and can use your proficiency rank in warfare lore instead of your proficiency rank in deception to meet the prereqs of feats that modify create a diversion or feint actions, including lengthy diversion, which they call out, but you also get lengthy diversion as part of that class feat. So and the requirements are you can prepare at least 2 tactics. So as long as you're not archetyped in, I'm assuming we don't know what the dedications are going to be like at this point.
That's not part of the playtest at all yet. So
I assume that's why that line is there, because every commander is going to have baseline 2 tactics at least. It's baseline 4 tactics, but yeah.
Yeah, so definitely lots of reasons. I mean, I don't know why you wouldn't go all in on intelligence with this class, but I mean, when you really look at all of the feats and the lore that goes along with that intelligence modifier, and like, again, if you're going that combat meta kind of route, it really encourages you to be high intelligence, I think almost more than any other class in the system.
I think they've tried to make sure that they've reined that in earlier in the creation of the game in general, just to not unbalance things and take niches away from different classes. But I think these 2 classes are, to me, it feels like they have learned a ton about how they can play within their own system that they've created, and how they can properly adjust things so that everyone can get benefits from everyone else without taking away from other players. And I think that's really important. And I think especially for the commander, that not taking away from other players is a really important thing that they have to have. And from everything that I've looked over with this class so far, they've actually ridden that knife's edge really well. Like, it is not tipping too far one way or the other. The use of int is great. The giving other people reactions, and if I remember correctly, there are further feats that give more reactions to more squad mates, correct?
There was a feat that allows you to give 2 reactions rather than 1, from what I recall. I suppose I could look for that. But yeah, I do think that's an interesting point about, I was mentioning earlier not stepping on other players' toes in terms of being too bossy, basically saying, go over there when they wanted to be at a different spot on the battlefield. But not only that, but just not conflicting with other classes and other builds, just in terms of your overall role in the party. And I this is a very unique class. I mean, it's a very different play style than everything else. Sure, we have, maybe you would say bards and witches are the closest comparison due to their buffing and sometimes debuffing abilities, but it's not as focused, nearly as focused and as tactical as this is.
No, the bard, I mean, they get to basically passively bring buffs to all of the other players, which is their buffs kind of exude from an extra point on the battlefield, which actually does kind of make it work semi like the banner in some ways, but it's a lot more, it's less buffing and more like circumstances that are going to maybe hurt the enemies further, on top of maybe some buffs. This one is all buffs all the time, baby. So sometimes you're gonna also just be healed by being underneath the banner. Like it's really fascinating. I mean, they even have a feat that I think may be toned down a little bit down the line, the officer's education feat at level 8, where they even more lean into that intelligence, because you get 2 skills trained, bump up one of your trained skills to expert, learn an extra common language, and get a general feat that's 3rd level or lower. The only restriction on this is that you can take it twice.
And you're basically 2 characters at that point with all of your
Exactly.
all of your skills and languages and everything. So
yeah, because you're already a skill monkey with all of your int and the skills that they give you. So this is just leaning further into skill monkey territory.
and that we mentioned earlier how your warfare lore basically means you kind of don't need some skills unless you really want them, but like you already have warfare lore, which is going to allow you to do more things than most lores, frankly. You're high intelligence, you've got good skill training on top of that, and then there are feats to pick up more skills. So
Yeah.
we haven't talked much about exploration outside of the mountaineering and naval training, but you're going to be, very good at doing quite a lot of things in this system. You have flexibility. You can be a distinguished officer, gentleman, and go in on diplomacy. And you're not very incentivized to be high charisma, but you could invest a bit in charisma and do that, or you could be super athletic and go that way. So lots of options, but we should probably move on and get into the other class, the Guardian. Now, this is another martial class, and that's about where the similarities